This is Karen with NewClevelandRadio.net, and it is time for the Intentionality Gurus with Candace Pollock. And today we are talking about procrastivity. Now, is that a real word or was that word made up for this session?
It was a word that somebody else apparently made up. So it's a combination of procrastination and, hyperactivity,
Okay.
ADHD.
All right.
Okay.
So,
So as a non-procrastinator, you, not me,
right.
um, you might not be able to relate to that part, but there might be times that any of us can face these kinds of issues. So I'll explain kind of the backstory, the
Okay.
circuitous route on how I arrived at this topic. So I have loved the work of Cal Newport, who is a professor of technology. I think it's at George Washington University. I might have the university wrong, but he wrote Deep Work and Digital Minimalism and A World Without Email, a whole bunch of things, and they're all fabulous. And so even though technology is his field, he's an advocate for making sure that it doesn't take over our lives. And I was never a big Facebook person. I mean, I was resistant to it. I was
Right.
resistant to a lot of those things. And then I started taking a lot of programs online, more so, with COVID and the shutdown, Zoom, and a lot of things, the programs were only available through Facebook. That's where you would go to, get your lessons
Right.
and share things. And then there were, meetings to talk about the lessons and so on. So, I'm embarrassed to admit how many of these groups that I belong to, some of them with programs that I've finished. And I started to find it overwhelming. So long and short, or maybe not so short, I was talking to someone I coach, and she mentioned that she thought she had ADHD. She's an adult. And I said, I've always kidded that I have adult acquired ADHD. And this is before all of that social media stuff that
Sure.
I inadvertently couldn't avoid. So anyway, I told her I had a self-test that I had come across a number of years ago, I think it was. And then I would forward it to her. I did. She sent me an article from Attitude magazine.
Okay.
Attitude, ADD, not ATT.
Okay.
.com, and it was about why the ADH brain chooses less important tasks and how cognitive behavioral therapy can improve prioritization skills and other things. And they talk about procrastivity in that article. But the thing that really tipped me over was I just inadvertently came across an article in the Atlantic magazine by a Caitlin Flanagan, and she basically wrote an article about a Twitter addict realizes she needs rehab. All right, and it's she apparently does have some history of addictive behavior, but she goes into this in depth about how she just got really focused and got hooked on the number of characters and editing things and so on. She's a writer for a living. All right.
Okay.
And anyway, the long and short of it is she was talking about how it's created this uptick of this addictive behavior for her. So all of these things just in the space of about a week, I thought, okay, I think this is a topic that is speaking to me. I don't know how much I'm into synchronicity, but this would be an example of it if I were. So I started digging in. There's some Psychology Today magazine articles about it and so on. So I'm not talking about these things, the ADHD in adults from a clinical sense. I'm not a doctor, I'm not a therapist. But just like the grief recovery method and some of the other things like the 15 commitments of leadership, a lot of those concepts I think can be applied just to our daily lives, just to give us a little framework. So that's what I wanted to share. So
Okay.
do you ever procrastinate about anything?
Yes, I do. But what happens when I start to do that, then I get very, very hyper about, how am I going to get it done? I've put it off, and am I going to get it done, or Am I going to be like some other people in my life and hope that,
No one you live with, right?
yeah, somebody else will do it, for me? Um, and typically because people around me know that I'm always going to get it done, they very rarely will jump in and do it for me unless I ask. Okay. And I'm getting better at asking, but I still have a long way to go. So, yeah, I understand procrastination, um, but not to the point that I that I would do it as often as the two men that I live with.
We shall remain nameless.
Yeah, exactly. Like nobody knows Richard and nobody knows Alex. So hey,
Who have not been named.
right, exactly.
But the idea is, like anything we talk about on this podcast, we're talking about kind of the submerged iceberg of things that drive a lot of our thoughts, feelings, behaviors,
Right.
and actions. And here's an example of it. We can be somewhere on the spectrum on certain things and a different place on the spectrum on other things. And so when I dug into some of this material, that hyperactivity you mentioned is the activity end of the procrastivity. So, but I'm curious as to whether you experience a sense of angst when you haven't been able to get something done. Sometimes the procrastination may not be yours, but others have,
Right.
volunteered you for it in essence.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, I take such full responsibility that it can be very painful.
Yeah, exactly. So the idea is just to notice how these concepts may show up. So I was fascinated when I dug into the material on attitude, not attitude, on .com and the Psychology Today element. So, I mean, that should be an indication this is not deep research on my part. It was just,
Okay.
it's a convenient mental framework construct. And what they tell us is that the clinical ADHD is different in adults than it is for children. And from my reading, it isn't just children with ADHD are adults with ADHD, because apparently there is such a thing as some element of an acquired ADHD as an adult. So, I had self-labeled me with that idea. And most of it had to do with all these things I take on. All right. So some of the common denominators, the symptoms, if we could call it that, for the non-clinical ADHD in adults is we have trouble finishing the final details of a project. We might dig in and get really excited about it and so on, the shiny object or the squirrel concept. We tend to multitask. I don't know if you ever multitask.
Oh, never.
Right, right. Difficulty unwinding. So once I get caught up in something, sometimes it's hard for me to let it go. And I
Right.
thought, gee, where did this come from? Because I was a lifeguard for years in high school and through college, and I would just sit behind my sunglasses and I watched the kids, obviously, everybody in the pool, but there wasn't a lot of heavy lifting mental stuff
Right.
going on during that time. And I was perfectly okay with it. But to do that today in this world, this time in my life, I can't, that to me would be torture. They can't, they tend to avoid sustained tasks, which is different than the not being able to finish the final details. I lose interest. I think I've mentioned it before that I often am internally saying, particularly with some coworkers, no one local. So if Angela's listening, she shouldn't take this personally, that I'm internally saying too many words, or sometimes I can't even finish an email. It's like, okay, I read that first sentence and, I'm off to the response.
Right.
So, I have to catch myself with that. So the point of it is, I think I'm mild in my symptoms. The person that I was talking to and some other people, in preparation for today, were basically saying they can't remember a lot of things and so on. So for me, the other symptom that is really chronic is losing things. So I have a cycle. They're not in the same order, but I'll lose my phone. I will, thank God for Google Find Phone thing. I'll lose my keys, and then I'll lose my wallet. And they're, so they don't go in that order, but inevitably I'll lose those things. So it's just because my brain is on other things. As much as I meditate and I do all that other stuff, and I think it's a function of, the bombardment with all the
Right.
social media, et cetera, et cetera. So in this case, the very common approach in terms of people with this procrastivity tendency is they will very often be busy with less important tasks before they ramp up to do the important tasks. And then there's an element of underestimating how long the important task will take, or underestimating how long they're going to take to do it.
Okay.
They're
Yep.
technically separate things. And if what they are going to undertake doesn't have a familiar approach or protocol or ramp up, it'll be harder for them to start than something where they've done it before and they know how to approach it. And I know that that's something that I've had to teach myself over the years, that I haven't had this specific challenge or problem to solve, but I know how I go about typically solving issues.
Right.
So anything along those lines for you?
Well, one of the things that I've been having a huge problem with is that my husband and I have totally different schedules. When he has assignments, he often leaves very, very early in the morning. So, of course, I get up very early in the morning. And then sometimes he comes home early afternoon or past what I would consider dinner time. And so because of that, I procrastinate about even thinking about what we're going to do for dinner. And it's not that we don't have food in the house, but typically it's all in the freezer. And I make myself almost ill over it because when he's not around, I don't eat. And it has nothing to do with him other than the fact that I just get more involved in what I'm doing and the things around the office here. And so when it's dinner time, I'm hungry, and he either is too tired to really eat, or he ate late in the day, or he doesn't know what he wants. And I feel like I'm a hamster on on one of those little wheelie things, because I'm constantly, do you want this? Do you want that? And then when he finally says what he wants, it's like, oh, I don't even know if I have it in the freezer, or I don't know how long that's going to take. And the days that I actually sort of plan and just in the morning grab something out of the freezer, make sure it's thawed and whatever, and know when I should start it and approximately what time we're going to eat, I'm much more organized with everything else in my day. But I don't do that every day.
Right.
And when I do it, it's like, wow, if I just did this every day, I could be organized, and I could, take that break to go for a walk, or I could take a break and, watch a Netflix, movie. Lots of different things I can do when I, can plan out my day, but I don't do that. And instead, I just run in circles and try to juggle. And um, like you said, at one point, I sort of identify what I can put off and what needs to be done now. It's like the only organization. But then I worry about, when am I going to get those other things done?
Right. So they're always like tagging along in your brain that you
Yep.
don't really have free time without that
Right.
occupying something there,
Yep.
kind of like a little kite tail or something like that.
Yep.
Yeah. So, in looking at the articles, I mean, we've already covered a lot of tools in prior podcasts in terms of some of the ways to approach these things, but what they talk about using the CBT, the cognitive behavioral therapy approach that is available to lay people. Obviously, people who have a serious problem need to go to a therapist and so on. But just for the off-shelf approaches, is that reframing thing that we've talked about before.
Right. Mm-hmm.
That label it to, or what is it? Name it to tame it. That's an easier way to remember it. So they talk about reframing the discomfort. So rather than thinking, oh my God, I'm not going to be able to get this done, or I should have gotten that done, all that stuff we do to beat ourselves up, or I don't want to do it. So for me, it doesn't even show up in my conscious awareness that I don't want to do it. But, a good tip off that I don't want to do it is if I'm doing like 2 crossword puzzles or something like that. It's just, I call it my self-soothing activity. So for me, that's not heavy lifting, but it's not necessarily something that I have to submit by a deadline, right?
Right.
So it's just busyness. So the idea is to reframe the idea about the discomfort we're feeling. So if we acknowledge, there's something that we're not feeling comfortable with, then we'll have a better sense of getting to that, the idea of what thoughts are we having about it. I don't know enough about it to come up with a solution, or I'm not going to have enough time to do it, just to kind of dissect it a little more clearly. We've talked about that algorithm, the if this then that algorithm.
Right.
So that's another way, and that's particularly useful in the context of those things where we don't have a ramp up process already in place. So let's say it's a new problem or something like that, or a new situation that we don't have specific prior experience with. So, but we can tie it to something that we know we will reliably do. And so in terms of my daily activities, I have put benchmarks on either end of the day, and I'm much better in the morning. I'll tend to do those. And there's about 5 things that I'll religiously do in the morning. But when it comes to night time, the end of the day, I'm not as reliable with that stuff. And, it's kind of like, in my mind, it's kind of along the lines of I've run out of cope. My cope
Right.
is thin by the end of the day. But I do have my schedule set up with it electronically shown that I have those benchmarks, the protocols at the beginning, at the end of the day. And that has saved me several times. But I might not get back in the groove that day, but maybe the next day or the day after, I'll get back in that groove. So it sounds a little OCD-ish, which also can be an element. But in terms of your work schedule and so on, would be one of those
Right.
benchmarks.
Well, one of the things that my family says I drive them crazy about is we'll be sitting having dinner, and my husband tends to eat much slower than me. Um, and I probably should learn to eat slower. But, anyways, he eats much slower than me. I'm done eating, and I'm sitting there, not taking my plate into the kitchen, not cleaning up the kitchen. But in the back of my mind, I'm thinking, there's a pan that needs to be scrubbed and this has to be put away.
Mm-hmm.
And so eventually I get up. Well, he's either just finishing up or he's finished up and he's just sitting there relaxing. And he'll say to me, why did you have to get up and do that now? And my answer always is, well, if I don't get up and do it now, are you going to get up later and do it? And typically his answer is probably not. And it's like, Okay,
The
so
truth teller.
yeah, so I mean, it's got to get done, right? And he'll understand that, but it's like, yeah, but couldn't you have waited until I was totally done, whether it be sitting there relaxing or whatever? And it's like, but I don't want to sit around on your schedule because like I have other things I want to do. And you know, we laugh about it, okay? It's luckily we don't get into arguments about it, but it's like, you always have something to do and it's like, yeah, I do. Because I'm not good at if I sit down for any length of time, and I guess I have to make this big apology to my one podcaster on Tuesday afternoon, is that I don't do a lot in his podcast. And just because the timing of it from 3:30 to 4:30, I sit here with my eyes nodding off. Um, 'Cause I've got to be busy doing something. And if I'm not busy doing something, I can just fall asleep. And so that's part of the reason, I get up and do things, because if I sit at the table like my husband was or does, I guarantee you I would fall asleep sitting in my dining room chair.
Yeah, and so I'm on closer to the end of that end of the spectrum. But what I found is, and I didn't even notice it until my husband pointed it out to me, that I do have that shiny object syndrome. And my assistant used to understand that she couldn't come in and give me the mail, because I had to then look at it. All right, even though I needed to be working on something else. And even just, holding it on my desk, it just, it grabs my brain.
Yep,
So,
exactly.
I had to put some, protections in place. And when my husband was ill and was, at home, bedridden, he would say something to me, when you go downstairs, dear, would you get me such and such? And I would get up and go get it. And
Right.
he got frustrated with me because he said, I don't want you to do it right away. And, it was no problem, but then it was difficult for me not to do it. All right. So the just sitting and relaxing, the old lifeguard mode, I must have expended all of my sitting back and relaxing when in my late teens and, early 20s years or something. But I think all of the social media stuff and so on, and the article in the Atlantic really goes into how the social media sites are intended to hook us, to keep us engaged, and what if, and there's a whole bunch of neuroscience behind that. So in terms of procrastivity, it can be a matter of degrees. And to be able to, one, recognize it, the noticing that we always talk about on these podcasts, because once you notice, you have a fork in the road, and then you have a choice, and you can take a new path, or you can continue to do it the old path, whichever works. And you can even back up and return to the original path if you didn't like the new
Right.
one. And then just pull out some of the old staples of if X, then Y, or to tie some specific activity with something you're going to reliably do. So I'm in a coaching program, or in several programs, but one of them we're buddied up with some people. And so the person I'm buddied up with mentioned that she was doing squats while she brushes her teeth. And I thought, oh, gee, I should be doing that. So I've been doing it. All right. And so now I cannot do it, not do it.
Right.
All right. And then I started pushing up the number of how many I do. And then I was starting to resent it. And I didn't want to do it. And it was this big internal, it was the procrastivity part. And then what they're saying is, put some limits on things, as some of the approaches, the CBT approaches and so on. So I just said, I'm not going to do more than 15. Okay.
Okay.
But I've been doing them religiously. And I went through a month of doing this other activity. And then on whatever, after like 30 2 days or whatever it was, I just thought, I woke up and I thought, I'm not doing it, that day. And it just took me a few more days to get back in the groove. So the point is, we can be gentle with ourselves, we can notice, but I thought it was a useful concept to come up to talk about because it is prevalent. Cal Newport is writing about it in all of his books. And then this Atlantic article was just reinforcement along those lines. So,
Well, you hit the nail on the head that we have to realize that we are human and there are going to be days that we're just not going to do it, whatever it is. And, we have to stop getting mad at ourselves because I know that's been my tendency. So it's interesting when you said, brushing your teeth and doing squats. Um, I started when I get up in the morning, I go down and I make a cup of coffee, and while I'm making it, um, I do push-ups on the steps because of my knee. I can't get down on the ground, so I do it on an angle, and um, I probably do it 6 out of 7 days a week. But when I don't do it, um, in the beginning, I was just like, you know, blasting myself over it.
mhm, mhm.
You missed it this morning, or you didn't go down and make coffee. And so now you think you have an excuse not to do, your sit ups or your push ups. And I mentioned it to my physical therapist, and she said, you know, Karen, you are allowed not to do something. She said, now you should know why you don't want to do it. And if you need to do something for your health or whatever, then find another way to approach it. And I realized I like doing it, but maybe I was in a hurry, and I didn't do it, or maybe my mind was wandering, and I forgot to do it. Um, and so now I'm giving myself permission. Hey, if I don't do it, it's okay. And I don't have to absolutely do it while I'm making coffee. Um, I could be on my way up the steps from being downstairs and, take the 5-10 minutes, of exercise and do it then. So I think a lot of us blame ourselves for the things that we want to do and then take a vacation from it.
Yeah, I agree. And I was doing wall push-ups because I have a shoulder injury and I, technically have a back injury as well
Right.
that gets set off. And I started out with, my classic approach where I did a few and then I added, and then I was really getting crazy. And then I missed several and I thought, okay, I've got to make up for those. So I was bunching. I mean, it was just like insane, like self-induced
Right.
idiocy. And I, after reading this article, I realized one of the things they talk about is having that range of acceptable behavior. Like, this is pass fail. It's not A plus versus F minus, folks, but to be able to say, how much time you're going to devote to something so that it isn't an open-ended, which tends to increase the procrastivity quotient. And also to say, I'll do it 4 days out of the week or whatever number it has to be, or I'm allowed to miss, X number without having to make them up, because it was getting pretty insane there how many of those wall push-ups that I was doing just to make up for that little stint where I didn't want to do them. And then that just set me up for not wanting to do them because it was too many to do.
Well, and something happened at work today, which sort of goes hand in hand with this. Part of what I do when I'm training at the store is I let both the sales reps and the customers know everything that is in the package. And when I say in the package, if you're buying a computer, all the different things that you would need. And there's sort of it's not a script, but it sort of is a script that you don't want to miss out on one of these items. And today I totally blanked out that there's a credit card special going on. And so the sales manager had been listening to me, and he came by and he
Of
goes,
course, on that one conversation, right?
yeah. Well, actually, it was 2 in a row that I forgot
Oh,
it.
gee.
Yeah. But he was so nice about it because he came over and he said, you had a really good sale there. And I said, well, the customer had done their homework and I verified it. And, so we had it all in stock. And he said, but there was one thing you missed. And I stood there for a second going, and I was really waiting to be reprimanded in some way. And um, he just looked at me and he said, it's okay. He said, because I don't remember half of it. He takes out this little card, okay? And I've noticed that when he waits on a customer, he pulls this card out of his pocket and
Ah,
sort of uses it. And I thought, do you know how many times I've like felt so bad that I missed something?
mhm, mhm.
And then of course, thinking he's going to reprimand me, and he goes, Karen, take a deep breath. And I said, but I like to get things right. I
Yeah, yeah.
don't like to get things wrong. And he goes, if I expected everybody to hit every single point with every customer, he said, that's unrealistic because a customer might throw you off because they ask you a question in the middle of it, or you see something out of the corner of your eye. And I couldn't stop thanking him today because that's the thing that stresses me out the most when I'm doing a job.
Mhm.
If I've missed something and then either somebody catches me on it or I catch myself, you know, I'm I start like, oh, how could I do that? I must be so stupid. And, you know, I'm
You're
not. I just
you're a
forgot.
human being, right, right.
Yeah,
So
exactly.
that's why one of my mantras is, "Aren't you glad we don't practice medicine?" Because and my husband, who was a physician, used to say, "You don't wanna know, dear," more or less. But, so the idea is to be non-judgmental with any of the noticing, and then to, just pay attention to, how this may show up in life, and, notice if it's going to, be something that we're gonna move in one direction or the other. So,
Absolutely.
can have some
Well,
fun with it.
Well, to all of our listeners, I'm hoping that you're getting as much out of these podcasts as I know I am. And I think that it also helps Candace because when she's with her clients, you know, there's is going to react a little bit differently on
Mhm, yeah,
how they go through these things, and I think that's really important for us all to realize that it's not a one size fits all, and if we don't make a mistake, then we have nothing to learn.
exactly. Yep,
So
exactly. Yeah, so I'm gonna include links to some of the things I mentioned on the, Facebook page.
okay,
And then that can be available for people if they want to take the
yep,
test themselves or have the links to the articles and so on.
that sounds wonderful. Well, we'll be back again in 2 weeks. And again, you can contact us at newclevelandradio@gmail.com. We'd love to have you participate in a podcast. Um, maybe you've heard my voice too much, so you would like your
But
voice
and
to
I
be
know
heard.
that little guinea pig named Karen is tired of being the guinea pig. So, but some people have said they want to participate, but maybe they are procrastivity
Yeah.
um, activity doing. So they haven't yet pulled the plug on that.
But the door is open, so don't forget.
Anytime,
Uh,
anytime.
have
All
a
right,
great day. Talk to you soon.
all right. Thank
Bye.
you. Bye bye.
Bye.